Welcome back to Hardball. As we've reported here many times on Hardball, Republicans have launched a nationwide assault to suppress the votes of blacks and other groups likely to vote Democrat. Tuesday night's primary elections in North Carolina gave us an frightening new look at the early fruits of those efforts. The state's new laws, which the New York Times has called the country's most sweeping restrictions on voting in the country, were in effect for the first time this Tuesday. And the results were not pretty. While most of the most severe parts of the law don't kick in for a couple of years, not till 2016, election watchdogs on the ground in North Carolina are already noticing some disturbing trends, new realities. According to a summary of monitoring work done by the Voter Defender Project, quote, the law's disqualification of votes cast in the wrong precinct caused major confusion, and the state's campaign to inform voters at the polls about the coming ID requirement was carried out in a wildly inconsistent manner. When the law kicks into full gear over the next few years, this is me talking, the fallout will likely only get worse. And of course, that's the point. Republicans in the state have passed the law last year. It eliminates same-day voter registration, kills a popular program that pre-registered high school students, and it slashes early voting, and it mandates strict voter ID requirements. Those requirements disproportionately affect minorities, especially blacks. That's according to a study conducted by the state's Department of Motor Vehicles. And like I said, if Republicans have their way, what's happening in North Carolina will be coming to a city near you. Eugene Robinson's an MSNBC political analyst and Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist with the Washington Post. And Brian Perlmutter is the director of North Carolina's Voter Defender Project. Brian, I want to start with you on the ground. And what was your reaction? How do you assess the results of the voter laws as they're affecting the minds of voters and how they actually go and try to vote, the good people who do try to vote?
Yeah, and on Election Day, which was Tuesday, we had over 300 people on the ground in 36 counties in North Carolina. And what we noticed was that people were confused when they came to vote, especially in places like Boone and in Halifax County. Voters who are showing up to vote at precincts, and the state, in specific counties have been changing and moving precinct locations, that the out-of-precinct voting regulations that would not allow people who are voting out of precinct for their votes to count, that folks who are showing up at the wrong precinct were having to be shuffled around and were very confused on where they needed to vote.
So it used to be the law in North Carolina was if you showed up at the wrong precinct because you went to the closest place you thought was the closest place, they would still count your vote. But now what happens?
Yeah, now your vote doesn't count. You have to be at the right precinct. And so where I was in Boone, North Carolina, there were students who were showing up. The campus is split into two. And so students who were showing up with their roommate to go vote at a polling location would be inevitably at they would pick the wrong precinct and have to walk a little over a mile to get to the other precinct. And so just regulations like this are making it harder and making it more difficult for students to vote, for people of color to vote. And this is a trend across North Carolina that happened yesterday.
And this is all purposeful, Gene. Look at this. A Republican in North Carolina actually went on the record during an interview with The Daily Show to gloat about how these laws would hurt the black vote. And this is Don Yelton, a North Carolina Republican precinct chairman. Take a listen to this guy laying it out there.
The law is going to kick the Democrats in the butt. If it hurts a bunch of lazy blacks that wants the government to give them everything, so be it.
And it just so happens that a lot of those people vote Democrat.
Gee.
Well, it's amazing when you get the eye of the tiger here. Anyway, Yelton was forced to resign after that incredible interview. You're not supposed to say it out loud.
No, you're not supposed to say it out loud. What you're supposed to say out loud is, well, this is to protect the integrity of the voting process. We can't have voter fraud when, in fact, let's just set the context. This is all ostensibly to solve a problem that doesn't exist.
No, they have a problem, though. It's a different problem.
Well,
Democrats are voting
really
Democrat.
to solve a different problem. It's ostensibly to solve a problem that doesn't exist. But aren't you amazed?
I mean, you grew up in the South Carolina during the worst days. You saw it all. Yeah. But this guy, are you surprised that this guy's willing to just come out and mumble out the fact this is to keep blacks from voting, just like in the old days with the literacy test?
Actually. I mean, even back then, they would keep up a pretext.
They would say they were looking for truly literate voters.
Exactly, or something like that. Just not say, a bunch of lazy blacks.
Well, Brian, this guy talks like Mr. Poll Tax, Mr. Literacy Law. Can you spell this Greek word here? He doesn't seem to have any problem saying that. When you go around there, are you surprised that the people are so openly, or are they so openly flagrant about the goal here to keep blacks from voting?
Yeah, I think there is this intense reactionary wave of people in North Carolina, but there's also a group of folks, you know, and like this grassroots effort that is mobilizing people across North Carolina to fight back against these immoral laws. People want to get involved, and people are tired in North Carolina, and they want, you know, the voting process to be meaningful. And so, you know, we've been mobilizing people on the ground and all over the place to really fight back against this legislation.
Okay, by November, is there going to be a fair vote in North Carolina, or is it going to be tilted, the table tilted against Kay Hagan getting reelected, basically on the ground? I know you're not partisan, but will the laws and the way they're being enforced and the way people are perceiving them, is this going to tilt the table against Kay Hagan?
I think it's going to, you know, what we're seeing right now, and hopefully everyone is able to vote in North Carolina, but what we saw in the primary, and this is a primary election where there's a very small turnout, that people were already confused with what was happening with this law, when it was being implemented, if they needed an ID. There were precincts, you know, some people were asking folks and telling them they needed an ID for 2016. Other precincts, they wouldn't ask and tell people about these regulations. That it's just creating this confusion and this hysteria in North Carolina. And when you have millions and millions of dollars coming into the state, the last thing we need is more confusion and more layers on top of that, creating barriers for people to get to the polls. And so while we hope that isn't the case, and we're going to be on the ground making sure that everyone can get to the polls, it is definitely a concern that we have.
So you have Boehner in the white shirt doing the white shirt job. His job's to get out the crazy right-wingers by scaring them about Benghazi and IRS and Fast and Furious, even though these are words he would normally not speak, we know. And at the same time, you scare up the vote on the right. You have to scare away the liberal vote and the progressive minority vote.
Exactly.
It's pretty much two-pronged here.
Tilts the playing field.
Why are they doing this when they're already ahead? I mean, this is what Nixon did back in Hagan Douglas days back in 50 and ruined his career. This is what they did in 72 when they were going to kill McGovern. But no, they had to go and break into offices and cover it up. Why are they going so crazy?
You know,
they're going to win anyway.
They may not be sure they're that far ahead, you know?
Look at the polls, Gene. You look at the polls. Your paper produces
I see the polls. North Carolina is a state that's been changing. They got a huge Hispanic vote now. It's a changing state. It's changing week by week.
You're an optimist on your side, but let me tell you,
I think they're more insecure than you think. I don't look. I think
when you roll up the score in any game, you pay later for it.
Well, yeah.
I think they're trying to roll it up in a nasty way. Anyway, thank you, Gene Robinson. You're skeptical, but I think they're in a good shape right now if they wouldn't be dirty about it. Brian Perlmutter, we'll have you back again. We like your reporting. Up next, the new Washington Project. Michelle Bachmann was for before she was against this project. And this is Hardball, the place for politics. And also for Michelle Bachmann, we like having her displayed here.